Good afternoon. I call to order the September 30th, 2025 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. For the record, my name is Marae Bjornberg, and I serve as chair of the commission. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices and to speak clearly into the microphone when speaking at the dais or giving testimony. Would the clerk please call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum?
Commissioner Alexander.
Present.
Booty is absent. Hare.
Present.
Corrado.
Present.
Melblom.
Present.
Rodriguez.
Present.
Thomas.
Present.
Wallace.
Present.
Vice Chair Maston.
Present.
Chair Bjornberg.
Present.
There are 9 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have quorum and that Commissioner Booty provided proper notice that they have a conflict this afternoon and their absence is excused. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We will work from the agendas that are available by the clerk. I will go through the agenda and sort out which items will be withdrawn, which items will be continued, which items will be discussed, and which items will be put on the consent agenda. Item number 4 is 948 18th Avenue Northeast, Ward 1. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness and will be discussed. Item number 5 is Heritage Preservation Text Amendment, all wards. This item is a text amendment that was continued from the September 16th meeting that will be discussed. So, the proposed agenda. The following items will have staff presentation, public comment, and commission discussion and action. That is item number 4, 948 18th Avenue Northeast, Ward 1. The following item will have staff presentation and commission discussion without a public hearing. Item number 5, Heritage Preservation Text Amendment, all wards. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
Maston so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Is there a second?
Melblom seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our September 16th, 2025 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Thomas so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Is there a second?
Hare seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Hare. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions, including commissioners who were absent?
Wallace abstains.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for conducting the public hearing. First, planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions of staff. Then I will open the public hearing and we will hear from the applicant and commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. After that, we will invite public comment. If you wish to speak, we need you to do 2 things. Please be sure to sign up on the sheet over by the clerk. If you haven't done this already, you can do so afterwards. When you come up to testify, you must state your name and address for the record. Please keep your comments specific to the application before us today. Since we have a group of people here, I will be limiting comments to 2 minutes each and ask that you focus on new information not already presented. If you have materials to hand out, please give them to our clerk so they may be distributed to the commission and entered into the record. Do not approach commissioners at the dais. After public comments are complete, I will close the hearing and commissioners will deliberate and act on the application before us. So our first item is item number 4, 948 18th Avenue Northeast, Ward 1. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. The staff report is presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg, and good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rob Skalecki, Senior City Planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED Planning. And today I'm presenting the Certificate of Appropriateness to demolish the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House located at 948 18th Avenue Northeast. The Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House was designated in 2021 for its significance in the areas of social and architectural history under Criterion 1 and Criterion 4. The Cook House is significant as a local example of a brick Queen Anne house. John L. Cook was a mason and house builder in Northeast Minneapolis, and he built the house for himself in 1889. It is located at the corner of Tyler Street Northeast and 18th Avenue Northeast, and that's what lends its name to the landmark. Cook's use of the cream-colored brick with the red brick accents is rare. Queen Anne details on the property include the corner tower, stained glass windows, the decorative wood, and soon after Cook built the house, he built and moved to a different house actually on 18th Avenue Northeast. So that's part of the reason we call it the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House, to differentiate it from the other ones that are on the street. It did become a multifamily home pretty soon in its history. In 1906, a small brick addition was built to the east side of the house and exists currently and is part of the gained significance of the property. The house is an example of immigrant housing in Northeast Minneapolis. The area had a significant Scandinavian immigrant population. Many people of Swedish and Norwegian descent lived here after John Cook sold the property, and many of them worked at notable Northeast Minneapolis East Side businesses or other businesses throughout the city. The 948 18th Avenue Northeast parcel includes two buildings. So there is the Cook House that's to the east of the parcel, and that's considered a contributing resource, and the frame one-story detached garage with a front gable roof is to the west of the parcel, and that's considering non-contributing on the designated property. The property has been registered as a vacant and boarded property since November 2014. Public sale records do show that the dwelling was sold in 2019 to the current owner. The property was condemned for lack of maintenance in January 2020. Minneapolis Inspection Services Division staff have been monitoring this property through the vacant building registration, also known as VBR, for many years. In that time, VBR team members noted that there seemed to be little, if any, action on the ownership to make improvements or maintain the property. So inspection staff noted that the property's condition did continue to worsen throughout the years from neglect and inaction, and that the fines associated with being on the VBR registry weren't seeming to be an incentive to initiate maintenance at the property. Inspection staff did take photos of the interior and exterior of the property in 2015 and 2018, so staff did include those with their respective date mark photos in the attachments for the HPC to reference. One thing we wanted to note too, in the 2018 photographs taken of the interior of the property by staff, the cookhouse's interior spaces were shown intact at that point. The property was nominated by Councilmember Kevin Reich of Ward 1 in 2020. And throughout this nomination and designation process, staff tried to be in contact with the property representatives, reaching out to make sure that they were aware of the process that was happening through nomination and designation. Staff at that time was not aware of the property owner's plan for the property, or if there was support or opposition to designation. Ultimately, the nomination and designation did move forward without a response from property representatives, and the property ultimately became a Minneapolis landmark on April 3rd, 2021. The applicant is proposing to demolish the John Cook House and detached garage. The applicant notes that the site had been originally proposed as a staging area for the planned 1717 Central Avenue Northeast construction project that neighbors the parcel to the west. However, the applicant doesn't give an update on if this is still the final plan for the lot once the house is demolished, if that is approved. As far as public comments, at the time of publication of the staff report, staff had not received any public comments to include as attachments. Since then, staff have received multiple public comments that have been included for your consideration today. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development has analyzed the application to demolish the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House, an individual landmark located at 948 18th Avenue Northeast, based on findings for a certificate of appropriateness. We will note that as part of certificate of appropriateness submission, there is the requirement to address the 5 initial findings for a certificate of appropriateness. Understandably, in proposing to demolish a demolition, staff found that the application doesn't meet those 5 findings. Specifically, staff wanted to point out the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation finding, that the proposed removal of the property will remove character-defining features, will remove historic features, historic materials that characterize the property. So the proposed demolition, of course, would not meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation of the property. In addition, under finding number 5, that the alteration is consistent with the spirit and intent of the preservation ordinance, the applicable policies of the comprehensive plan, and the applicable preservation policies and small area plans adopted by City Council. Staff did point out an area of code that should be considered here, which is Title 23, Chapter 599, Article 11 for maintenance. So under this article, there are pretty clear statements about how properties that are landmarks should be maintained. And staff wanted to note that the proposed demolition of the property is not consistent with this proposal. The property has been vacant since 2014, when it was registered as a vacant property with the city, and the property representative of the property is required to make sure the dwelling is in a safe condition and allow for the required maintenance. Since the property was designated in 2021, the landmark has not been secured or maintained per the requirements of that section of Chapter 599, which is Article 11. So from this point forward, the focus of the application submitted by the applicant falls on the destruction findings that are under a certificate of appropriateness, and those are the 3 that are listed if the property is proposed to be demolished. So with that, for the additional findings for destruction, the first finding that can be made is that the destruction is necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition at the property. The property owner and applicant did submit 2 structural engineer reports at the property stating that the property is in unsafe and dangerous condition. But staff did also note that the property has been on the VBR list since 2014. The only permit we could find for maintenance at the property was for a re-roof that was issued in August of 2018 to complete repairs at the home. Staff's not aware of other repair work that has taken place at the property since 2014. So in the 2 structural engineer reports, one that was done by Anderson Erlacher in 2022, and the other that was done by Paulson and Clark Engineering in 2025, both note that there are conditions at the property that require repair and attention. So the report by Anderson Erlacher, completed in 2022, does not include photos, so the extent of deterioration that was recorded at that time isn't really supported by photo evidence in that report. The report does detail that there are sloped or uneven floors at the first and second levels. Some water damage was identified at the second floor, and there were holes in the exterior that were detailed with falling brick in select locations, and you can see one of those here at the west side of the elevation with some brick missing on the second story. But overall, there was some masonry damage that was seen at all elevations. A note for this structural report that was also included in the other one was that the front porch is in a not good condition that needs stabilization. But overall, the extent of the exterior and interior work that is shown needed in this structural report does seem feasible when considering everything that we currently know about the property and the reports that were submitted to try to substantiate the need for demolition. Just a few more photos. These were actually taken by staff when the property was designated, so these date back to 2020. And then here's some photos that were included in the structural report by Paulson and Clark Engineering that was done in 2025. So again, it records kind of similar concerns that the previous report by Anderson and Erlacher did note for exterior conditions with the front porch and the front porch roof being unsafe to occupy, and those select areas with brick needing to be reinforced from falling on the exterior elevation. However, the interior assessment notably differs in the 2025 report. So the engineer notes that the stone basement wall is falling and in need of mortar repair. The report is also showing that the walls have been demolished on the first and second story. So that's something that staff was not aware of previously, that interior work had been done to demolish some of the interior walls. And the report here is noting that that's leading to some of the structural instability that the property owner is seeing here. So we have on the right, I should say on the left here, photos that were taken by city staff showing the interior intact, and those are dated in the corner. And then the most recent photos we have here without permit evidence of this being allowed in the property. So staff overall don't believe that the submitted reports provide conclusive evidence to show that the building requires demolition to correct the conditions that were noted in these reports. So the reports aren't fully consistent in their findings. They both suggest that economic feasibility appears to be the driving reason why the property can't be demolished. There appear to be multiple other routes to ensure that repairs can be completed, to have the property put in a safer condition, and other repairs are suggested but not confirmed by the application materials. So CPED finds that the property is not in an unsafe or dangerous condition to require the demolition. In the other finding for looking at if a property can be demolished, the destruction of a property findings, the second one looks at if there are reasonable alternatives to the destruction and determining whether reasonable alternatives exist. The commissioner shall consider but not be limited to 3 separate points. The first is the significance of the property. The second is the integrity of the property. And the third is that the economic value or usefulness of the existing structure, including its current use, cost of renovation, and feasible alternative uses. CPED finds that there are reasonable alternatives to demolition. When looking at the significance and integrity of the property, staff notes that the significance is unchanged since its designation study that was drafted in 2020, and the landmark was designated in 2021. As far as integrity, there have been items of the property that have continued to deteriorate, but not to a point that would noticeably impact the historic integrity of the property. As far as economic value or usefulness of the structure, this is an area that the applicant made a point for to try to make the case for the demolition of the property, noting that the current use as is not in a condition that is habitable and poses ongoing maintenance and liability costs with no revenue generating potential. The property is currently not in a use to be used as a dwelling, but the required repairs do appear possible, as staff noted. For the cost of renovation, the applicant does note that the estimated cost is about $1.5 million in needed repairs, and that far surpasses the current estimated value of the property. Staff did point out that the line item estimate of proposed items to complete those repairs wasn't as clear and didn't adhere to the Secretary of the Interior standards that we could tell. So some of the items that were included in there weren't directly correlated to some of the concerns that were raised in the structural reports for repairs that were needed. So with that, in addition to considering the ongoing maintenance that does need to be completed to be consistent with Article 11 of Chapter 599, staff did not believe that the proposal appeared to be cost prohibitive based on everything that the applicant provided. For feasible alternative uses, in staff's opinion, there are feasible alternative uses to the property. So it was built as a dwelling. It could be reused as a dwelling or placed in a new use. The applicant, again, notes that extensive repairs are required, but the necessity of these repairs shown in the itemized report are really they're absent from the cost estimate as a total. So again, staff, when looking at the structural reports and comparing that to the line item estimates, also the just maintenance work that needs to be done at the property, it didn't appear to be to a point that the property requires demolition in order to remedy, and that there would be no feasible alternative uses there. So with that, the findings that staff have made is that the subject property retains significance as recorded in the building's 2021 designation resolution. The subject property retains all 7 aspects of historic integrity. The property has not been maintained as required under Chapter 599, Article 11 maintenance, and currently needs maintenance and security. No unsafe or dangerous conditions which would necessitate demolition have been proven to exist at the property, and that there are reasonable alternatives to the demolition considering the significance, integrity, and economic value or usefulness of the existing building. With that, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the application by Todd Smith, Master Properties, for the property located at 948 18th Avenue Northeast, the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House, an individual landmark. And recommend that the Heritage Preservation Commission denies the certificate of appropriateness to demolish the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House, an individual historic landmark located at 948 18th Avenue Northeast. And with that, I'm available for any comments or questions. I know the applicant team is here as well, and is planning to make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, are there questions for staff? Commissioner Corrado.
Do you have any indication of what actions were taken by the city with the vacant building registration violations? And I guess my question is, were any actions recommended? Were they taken? Were they not taken? And then for the fines, were they paid?
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. Commissioner Corrado, that is something that staff had discussed briefly with inspection staff throughout the years. It does appear that fines are being issued for this. It's a pretty standard procedure with properties that are put on the vacant building registry. But I think the applicant or property owner may be able to speak better to that too. From staff's perspective, this was more of an issue that is best addressed with the inspection staff through the vacant building registry. So that's where this has been kind of their initiative from going back to 2014. So,
Thank you.
Are there other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. I will now open the public hearing for this item, and I understand the applicant is here and would like to speak. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
just put the USB in there, and then it should pop up on the computer.
Thank you. I thought that would be harder. Hi, Commissioners. My name is Todd Smith. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and if you can state name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Todd Smith, and I'm a principal at Master Properties, 201 West Broadway in Minneapolis. We're a local real estate development company. We've done over 60 projects in Minneapolis. I was hired by the owner of 948 18th Avenue Northeast, Abu Bakr Jibril, to represent him in this application of appropriateness and in today's hearing. I'm here to talk about the house's current deteriorated condition. The house has been poorly maintained both prior to and for the period of the current ownership. It was registered as a vacant and boarded property in 2014. Abu Bakr Jibril bought the vacant house in 2019 with the intent of redeveloping the property. However, in 2021, without Jibril's consent, the house was nominated for and placed on the local historic registry. Regardless of the history, here we are now. As I've reviewed the staff report and its recommendations, then compared the report to Mr. Jibril's application, it's almost like we're talking about two different houses. I'm not sure if the commissioners have had the opportunity to review the application. It includes, as was mentioned by Rob, 2 engineering reports, structural engineering reports from '22 and one from 2025. These reports contain a detailed listing of facts and is signed and stamped by 2 separate PEs who certify the accuracy and completeness of their reports. Similarly, my company put together a reconstruction budget with costs to rebuild the house. It's produced by our construction manager, Randy Lusk, who's built hundreds of buildings in his career. The reconstruction budget is a very thorough estimate broken out by construction divisions. This is what we do. Let's compare what's included in the application to the staff report. The staff report is filled with opinions and beliefs. I question whether staff has been to the site to access the current condition of the house. The staff report does not include any structural engineering assessments, any documented visits to the site, or include reconstruction estimates to support the position of staff. Staff has presented no empirical evidence or third-party reports that validate staff's position in its report or its recommendations. It is all beliefs and opinion. I've highlighted a few excerpts from the staff report to quickly run through. The applicant states the property is unsafe and dangerous conditions. The applicant and 2 structural engineers did. Structural issues are noted while the report assumes but does not confirm further electrical, mechanical, and plumbing concerns. That's not the job of structural engineers to do MAP things, right? That's what our construction estimate is for. It is standard practice for a structural engineer's report to have photos. I get structural engineer reports with great regularity that don't have photos. The report does not provide a cost estimate for the needed repairs. Again, structural engineers don't provide cost estimates. Staff do not believe the submitted reports can provide conclusive evidence to show the building requires demolition to correct the conditions noted. CPED staff finds the property is not an unsafe or dangerous condition to require demolition, without any data or facts supporting that up, despite the contrary to our application. Should the house be preserved? I don't know if that's the right question. The question is like, can it be preserved? And it can't. It's structurally unsound. It's economically unviable, and it's seriously unsafe. The house is dangerous, and it's a danger to the community. It could fall at any moment, and it would be horrific to watch it catch fire. That's something the neighbors just experienced recently on the other end of the block with the Central Avenue warehouse fire. There's precedent for certificates of appropriateness for the demolition of an individual historic landmark, 614 15th Street East and 3501 Hiawatha, to name a couple. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Charlie Robinson, who wrote the April 15th, 2025 Paulson & Clark Structural Engineering Report of Findings. His Minnesota license is 49161. For Charlie to earn his professional engineering designation, he had to attain a 4-year engineering degree, gain at least 4 years of work experience under a licensed engineer, and pass 2 rigorous exams. His license is considered the highest standard of competence in the engineering profession, symbolizing achievement and assurance of quality. And here's Charlie to walk you through his report and address some of the pictures, so you can make your determination on appropriateness.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie Robinson with Paulson Clark Engineering. Our address is 2352 East County Road J, White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Todd's going to pull up some photos that we've already taken a look at today. And I was just going to point out a few things that I saw when I was on site back in April. The first one, as you can see in photo 1, as noted in other photos that were there, where that the front porch and that upper balcony area are obviously in great disrepair. They would, in order to save them, they need to be pulled down kind of piece by piece, rebuilt, reflashed, re-put back together so that that building could, be occupiable for people in there. Photo 2 shows the deterioration of the brick and the stone at the corner. It would need to be, again, pulled apart piece by piece in my estimation, or replaced altogether, because that brick isn't going to be reusable again. Let's see. Oh, there we go. The exterior, The two parts of the exterior for me, and it's on that other picture, picture 5, which we'll show in a second, where that upper facade piece had fallen off. I worry or fear that that same thing's going to happen here with photo 3, where you can see the extensive water damage on the back of the house. I think that would be south. As well as you can see the bowing that's happening at the bottom next to that window where it's already been kind of patched. Again, in my opinion, you'd have to pull the bricks off piece by piece, put them back together, put proper waterproofing and things behind the building, or behind the brick. Replacement for sure of some of the bricks because they just, tuck pointing won't get the job done, in my opinion. Well, it's like this, okay. Again, we looked at this picture already where a portion of the upper level of the facade is fallen off. It's laying on the ground there. So if someone were in that area and something were to happen again, especially on the backside where there's 2 full stories of brick where it is bowed out at the bottom, you know, it could be problematic for the owner or whoever was underneath that brick. Oops, where's page down? Let's do it that way. In the interior, I didn't spend a lot of time in the basement. It's typical of a building that's that old, of a stone foundation wall that could use a little bit of updating and love. The interior, that I know was mentioned. I was there on one day only, the day that I took these pictures. I don't know how it got that way. I'm not here to comment on that at all, but the studs are removed. I can't imagine, without looking at the joist, it's hard to say that that's a bearing wall, so I'm not gonna say that it's a bearing wall, but the way this building would be framed, in my opinion, would be left to right or the other way, and one of those walls is a bearing wall, whether it's in the ceiling upstairs or not. So it hasn't snowed a lot in the last couple of years, so maybe that's why there isn't an issue here with this moving or cracking or collapsing in on itself. Again, I don't want to say that one way or the other, but it's not supported anymore. However it got that way, I don't know, but those walls have been removed. One direction or the other is a bearing wall, I'm not sure which, because the ceilings weren't exposed. So I guess the plaster's doing its great job of holding up the building at this point. But anyway, in my opinion, I do think that the building is unstable and unsafe in its current condition. So that's all I have to say.
Do you have questions for either of us?
Got questions?
Thank you for that. Commissioners, are there questions for the applicant? Commissioner Melblom?
Thank you. Mr. Smith, is the property fenced off right now?
It is not.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a reason that maintenance wasn't done to this building over the time?
I don't own the building, and I wasn't involved with the project that started. I don't know that there's a good answer. It's a shame that it's in the situation it is. I do know that maintenance work was not done on it, and I do know that the owner's intent when he purchased it was not to restore a historic structure, and nor was it registered as such.
Thanks. Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you, Chair Mel Bjornberg. My question is, you may not know the answer, but do you know when that interior demolition work was done?
I do not, and it looks, it's either a really bad demo crew, or it could have been, I know there's been a lot of homeless activity in it. I know some of the neighbors have been worried. There were some small fires that were in the interior. I think the house has been stripped of a lot of materials, whether it would be, I think some of the things that were probably historic, like cool wood moldings, but the copper's gone, the stained glass is not there.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Corrado?
Sorry, I don't remember your name, but this is a question for the structural engineer. Have you looked at any of the photographs from the 2018? And in your opinion, would it have been in a better structural condition than you found it in 25?
I would say probably, because someone would have done maintenance on it over that amount of time, but No, I haven't spent a lot of time studying them, to be honest with you, other than just my driving past it for a number of years.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Alexander.
You said the current owner bought it in 2019, correct? With the intent to develop the property? Do you know what that means, develop the property?
I think, or my understanding anyway, is this parcel sort of on the backside of a proposed redevelopment at 1717 Central Avenue. That was a 5 or 6 story multifamily with first floor commercial, and the thought was that that the house would come down and it would be used as a staging spot for building the new structure. And then I believe the intent was the first floor was going to have a daycare, and that would have been a playground.
Thank you.
Commissioner Meldum.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, are you the developer of the project at 1717 Tyler, I think?
My company that I bought into, Master Properties, was the developer. It stalled, and it was also before I was involved with the company.
Okay, so you're not currently the developer?
The project is sort of mothballed. It's not in a position to go forward. Multifamily, what was proposed for that site for a variety of reasons is not something that there's a path forward to at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant from commissioners? Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there, there are members of the public, so I will call you up. The first name that I have is Karen Grivna, and I apologize for any name mispronunciations. If you can state your name and address, and just a reminder that we will have a time limit, and so the clock will go off, and it might be jarring.
Okay, that is correct, Karen Grivna. I live at 1626 Tyler Street Northeast, which is down Tyler Street from the John Cook House. I prepared a timeline of observations, which should have been in your packet. And just to review some of the sections, my husband and I purchased our home actually 3 years ago today. And I've been watching for 3 years both this development, so-called development, structure, and 1717 Central. My first couple years, I was focusing on 1717 Central, which, by the way, the current Burger King building is in the process of some type of renovation. Apparently, they're going to try to open a daycare again, and there was one before that was closed. But on my timeline of observations, I ask that you look on the part from last March. And last March, I read, observed a man coming out of 948 and entered a white van parked behind the house. Mandy, who is my block leader, who was not able to be here today, but she also submitted a letter, reported that the inspector said that if a person has permission to be there, the person will need to secure the house when the person leaves. And so I did proceed to call 311. Then my husband saw, the next day, many lights on in the house. In fact, in my December timeline, we noticed lights starting to be on in the house, which we were concerned about. And then finally, on March 31st, I talked to someone who said they had been demoing the house for 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. The next name that I have is Andrew Hersey.
Thank you. Yep, Andrew Hersey, 1110 22nd Avenue Northeast. I've lived, this is just a few blocks away from the 18th Avenue Cookhouse. I've been there for 27 years. I'll just be quick. These houses are important to the neighborhood. They're irreplaceable. They're a tremendous asset when they're maintained and preserved. And anything that can be done to get to the point where the house is preserved as a member of the neighborhood and community, that would be my wish. It's been discouraging to see it just not maintained and fall into disrepair, and whatever the city can do to compel action on preserving the house, that would be my desire. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next name that I have is Matt Alley.
Hi, I'm Matt Ali. I live at 1606 5th Street, Northeast Minneapolis, and I'm speaking in opposition of the letter of appropriateness and applicable findings to demolish the building at 948 18th Avenue, Northeast. The very first time that I saw this home years ago, I could tell it was distinctive and held stories from the past. I don't have architectural expertise, so I didn't have the vocabulary to express what I was observing, but could sense I was looking at a special building. Since then, I've learned more about its history and specific architectural elements that make it unique from other buildings in the neighborhood. As I've talked with more of my neighbors, I've realized I'm not alone in noticing and valuing that. In looking through the engineering reports, I saw that they both conclude extensive work is required to repair the building and that it's not economically feasible to make those repairs. However, neither report makes conclusive statements about imminent failure of the structure, and economic feasibility is a subjective concept that will vary depending on the motivations and desired profit margins of the entity that defines the conditions of feasibility. Our neighbors making written and spoken public statements are demonstrating that they see value in this building beyond a single developer's bottom line. So I'm asking you to deny the request. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. The next name that I have is Adam Sage.
Hello, I'm Adam Sage. I live at 1906 Johnson Street Northeast. I'm also only a couple blocks from the John Cook House. I bike past it nearly every day, and it's a really beautiful part of the neighborhood, even in the state that it's currently in. Since it was designated as a historical landmark, the current owners have fallen short of their duties to maintain it. And I hope that we would be able to motivate them to maintain the property and enforce the protections that come with its historical designation. As a member of the Northeast neighborhoods, we want to see our neighborhoods grow and thrive, and there are plenty of opportunities for that to happen that don't require the demolition of such a significant piece of the neighborhood's history. So please, I'm asking to deny the request. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. That is all the names that I have. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and commissioners, let's discuss. I'm happy to start this one out because I live in Northeast, and I was also a commissioner at the time that this property came up for nomination. And I was so excited because I have to say I drive by this building probably every single day, once, if not multiple times. And it really is just very beautiful and also just such a unique property for where it is located. So I was very excited when it came up and got nominated, and I was like, oh yes, preservation in my own like literal backyard. And it has been really hard as, again, I have seen these conditions just really deteriorate over the past 4 years. And it's really unfortunate, and I feel like now also having a little bit of context around this, it's a little bit more frustrating because it feels like a sort of like, I don't know, perfect example of trying to go through demolition by neglect. It's sort of apparent that, admittedly, this property was purchased to be demolished for a staging area, which hurts my heart in general a little bit. But then to sort of just see it have nothing happen, and no maintenance, no nothing. This is something that even in the photos that we've seen from 2018 to now, the conditions have deteriorated so much, and all of this was sort of preventable. I also feel like from what we have seen and heard, it is not something that couldn't be fixed. So I am sad to see this sort of coming forward. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I just want to say that as the Heritage Preservation Commission, it is our responsibility to uphold both the letter and the spirit of our preservation ordinance. To me, it appears that there was some unpermitted demolition work that happened on this house. And when that happens, particularly on a designated landmark like this is, it's a serious violation that then undermines the integrity of our review process and the trust that the public places in us when we do designate these properties. To me, granting an approval for this would effectively reward that unpermitted work and sends the wrong message, essentially that compliance is optional and violations can be excused after the fact. I believe that we need to ensure that the owners who bypass the proper processes and implications of when they buy these properties, I know that it wasn't a landmark when he purchased it, but it is now, it is his responsibility, that they need to be held accountable. And I feel that any approvals moving forward should reflect both the harm done and the standards required of every applicant who does follow the rules. So, I'm not trying to punish anyone, but I do want to maintain fairness, transparency, and the preservation values that this commission is charged with protecting. And I know that there was a similar, I served on a board in Utah as well, a preservation board, and I know that there was a building where they started demolition without a permit, and the preservation HPC came back and told them they had to rebuild it. That was sending a message that this is not acceptable. We can't allow this to happen, and I would like to send that message as well. Thank you.
Thank you for those. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to say that hasn't been said yet is just that one of the hangups that I had in reviewing the application was that I agreed with the staff finding that there wasn't sufficient argument made to show that this couldn't be repaired and that the repair costs were, the way those were reached, it wasn't definitive enough for me to agree with or to see past that. And I think that is one of the major pieces I'm focused on here. But the other piece of it is that I think especially for locally designated properties, the bar to prove that economic prevention of going forward with a rehabilitation should be really high. And I think given the permitted deterioration over the course of time, that only would make the repair more difficult, and that is all on the owner and has been since 2019. So I think the documentation to prove that a repair would be infeasible economically should have a lot more to it than what was presented in this application.
Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Maston.
I feel like this one goes beyond demolition by neglect, where that's actual intentional demolition happening at the same time. Sometimes bearing walls perhaps were noted, or it's just frustrating. I think, too, a lot of the work that was just noted by the structural engineers, such as masonry repairs, rebuilding of porches, some structural reinforcement on the interior, is what a lot of us do every day. It's historic preservation. So I think that's probably the end of what I need to say to keep it polite.
Commissioner Alexander.
Thanks. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's, I think they intentionally let it deteriorate so that they could make the argument that it's infeasible financially to salvage or restore the building. And then to that end, to Commissioner Matson's point, I've worked on a bunch of buildings that when you first approach them, you're stepping over holes in the floor, or, I've had coworkers fall through floors. So, I mean, they can be in bad shape and still be, resurrected. But that doesn't seem like that was ever the intent here.
Thank you. Commissioner Melblom.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I also agree with a lot of things that were said, and I would add that if the property is perceived to be unsafe, then the owner should make it so that people can't get in there. And if it's the exterior, they should put a fence up around it. It just seems rather straightforward, because it's going to be their problem if somebody gets hurt because their building collapses. So with that, I would like to make a motion that the Heritage Preservation Commission denies the certificate of appropriateness to demolish the Tyler Street Northeast John Cook House, an individual historic landmark located at 948 18th Avenue Northeast.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. I really quick just want to check. I know that Commissioner Corrado had wanted to make a comment, so I want to make sure that you have the opportunity before a second.
I guess this is a bit of a, well, there's two things that I'd say. One is that I know it can be a burden on a property owner when they're purchasing a property without quite understanding the implication of a historic building. I do think the city is taking significant steps on the property listings to be able to make that more transparent for future homeowners. So I do want to recognize that steps have been taken in that regard. And then to the point of the cost in repairs, I do feel like in cases of properties like this, while the cost estimates we normally see are to bring the structure in its current condition up to a usable condition, I do think a consideration does need to be made to have brought it up from the point where it was recognized that the work was necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Corrado. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you. I don't have too much else to add, actually. I agree with my fellow commissioners. I just kind of wanted to go on the record saying that I am, pretty appalled to see the intentional neglect that has gone on. I do have concerns about the future, which is obviously outside of our purview today. But I do think that there are and have been all along avenues to make this house safe, even if it was vacant, and they have obviously been neglected.
Thank you for that. Is there a second for Commissioner Melblom's motion?
Wallace seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Any more discussion or comments on that? Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Alexander.
Aye.
Booty is absent. Hare.
Aye.
Corrado.
Aye.
Melblom.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Vice Chair Maston.
Aye.
Chair Bjornberg.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. That concludes our public hearing items. Our next item is item number 5, Heritage Preservation Text Amendment, all wards. The staff memo is presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. As we know, this is a continued item from the last meeting. I want to make staff's presentation brief, but a lot of this just follows up on the memo that was sent out and published with the agenda that just gives maybe a bit more of a detailed response. I think part of last meeting, I know a good part of the reasoning for continuance was just the timing issue. So at a point at the end, their staff didn't really have the opportunity to respond to some points that were being made. So this was continued from the last meeting, and with the specific concerns that we outlined in the staff memo, I just wanted to provide a little summary of those and also just take any questions or comments that might follow up from those. So the first concern that staff heard was that the planning director has more decision-making authority than the Heritage Preservation Commission. We mentioned this a bit last time, so when we mentioned the planning director, that is the defined it's defined as the designee of the CPED's director. So in this situation, it's always going to be staff. So CPED preservation staff are that designee for enforcing and carrying out the ordinance. So the powers and duties that we're proposing for the new draft is really very similar to those that were and have been in place since 2001. So we expanded and revised certain areas accurately just to update, what CPED staff actually currently does under the ordinance, just to be more clear about what is being done administratively and where those administrative duties are. So another thing we wanted to clarify is that the planning director is not a decision-making body and does not have the ability to overturn any decisions that were made by the Heritage Preservation Commission. So also with City Council having more decision-making authority than the Heritage Preservation Commission, as a legislative body in Minneapolis, the City Council has been elected to provide that democratic representation for the city's residents and local government. Through that, there are certain legislative decisions and other actions that have to be made by City Council. So the authority that City Council has or is being given under the proposed new Chapter 599 is very similar to the current 2001 ordinance that we operate under. There are the few differences we pointed out with nomination decisions and allowing council members and the mayor to be able to nominate without a previous determination of eligibility, and also with the design guidelines that are now going to council for adoption. Again, I know we've mentioned this a few times, and we understand if commissioners are still in opposition to this, but staff really did talk a lot about potential scenarios of, what if we keep it as is? What if we do, what if we allow elected officials, more powers in certain areas? And these discussions are around where the text ultimately landed were ongoing for many months in many situations with staff and the city attorney's office, and just ensuring that processes make sense not only for the HPC, but also that it's consistent with other boards and commissions and how different items go up through the council process for final legislative decisions. Another one we wanted to address is just the potential historic resource decisions that are being made by the planning director. So we heard that there was some concern that the commission should be doing those. With the potential historic resource decisions, that's something that staff is already doing weekly. So when we're reviewing wrecking permits, when we're reviewing historic review letters currently, these are decisions that sometimes we have to make, with the information we have, and it wouldn't be feasible to be able to bring those to the HPC every time we have one of those in front of us. So I think part of that too was just making that more transparent. So in wanting to clarify, what's a potential historic resource, how is that determined in the city? That's part of a longer process that we are currently going through, not only within the ordinance, but outside of that, just to make that all transparent. So the ordinance language largely is matching the transparency we're hoping for with the administrative changes that we're making. The comment with the city council members and the mayor who aren't subject to the potential historic resource requirements prior to nomination. That's when we stated a handful of times, I think staff understand if the commission is, in opposition to that one, but just in our memo, we just kind of clarified in writing one more time why we ended up having that as part of the final draft. I think that was one of the areas that we know you had voiced concern for in the past, and we did not end up changing just because of, as we note, with all the internal stakeholders we're discussing, and is this feasible, and should we allow this in different, which situation does this make sense? Ultimately, all those discussions landed on, we understand the commission's concerns, but in the draft that we need to bring forward to you, we can't have that included. With the designation decision, having that be HPC, and there was, I think, drawing back to last meeting, there was discussion about if council does not make a decision on a designation, is there any way the HPC can take final action? And that, as I think we touched on earlier, just isn't something possible. The only way a property or collection of properties becomes a landmark or historic district in the city is through a city council resolution, and that's not something that the Heritage Preservation Commission can do or influence, in a way that your decision would be final without council being able to make a decision on that. So that's something that I think we really wanted to be clear on in our memo and response as well. There was a comment too about the 90-day demolition and maybe concerns about the duration or, how long or how short that should be. And this was another one that staff really discussed in depth when we're looking at how we currently look at potential historic districts or how they've been considered in the past. The demolition delay hasn't been a thing, and that was based on guidance from our city attorney's office. So that was more recent guidance under how staff can evaluate properties that are located in potential historic districts. Does that affect the full district as the ordinance is currently written? And that's where some legal questions arose relatively recently with the city attorney's office. So having that 90-day demolition delay, we looked at, this is one of the areas we looked really specifically at other cities to see what they do, and this is actually pretty common within other cities when looking at considering potential local historic districts and landmarks. So we thought that having this process to have that 90-day demolition period really balances out, the need and possibility for someone to come forward with a designation within that time, who is a nomination within that time, who is allowed to nominate, but also understanding that, if you place a lot of properties kind of in this period of not knowing what might the outcome, what the outcome might be, that's not something that staff really wants to put property owners in that specific type of situation. So I'd be happy to answer more questions about that if there are any further concerns. But overall, the concerns that we heard, and we kind of touched on some of these too, so that your comments weren't heard from the previous meetings. I know that was brought up as a concern that some of the comments weren't put into actionable changes within, ultimately what we brought forward as a final draft. And I think as I explained earlier, with some of these concerns that we understand commissioners have, we did bring them to our team. We brought them to all stakeholders internally who need to weigh in on these items. And ultimately, if we did keep something in, it was because we were receiving, whether it was legal guidance from the city attorney's office, whether it was guidance from other planning staff about how that may or may not be different from other ways that planning processes operate. All these things were taken into consideration when we brought forward a final draft. So, I'll state too, again, it's completely within your right to vote on changes based on that too today. If you would like to see changes that staff did not address in a draft that you still want to see brought forward as recommendations to council for final adoption, that's part of what you can consider today. Also, the comment that we saw is that the HPC is now advisory instead of decision-making, or at least that was a concern, not that was is the HPC becoming more advisory and less of a decision-making body? And we just wanted to clarify, HPC, you are a decision-making body under the city's board and commission structure. So you do also have advisory powers, and really the way that the HPC works is within what is allowed through the council process as well. So, there are certain things that you can decide on, as we mentioned earlier. There are certain things that the council does or should be able to weigh in on if it is a decision that's affecting property owners in different ways. So another item I'm happy, I think both of us as staff are happy to answer more questions on if there are concerns there. We also wanted to clarify that there are kind of different ways that you can vote on this, so it is a bit different from how you might vote on a land use application, preservation application that comes before you. You could just recommend to approve it as written. You do have the ability to approve it with recommended changes, and an approval with recommended changes gives City Council a list of suggested edits by the HPC. So each recommended change can be voted on individually by you all as commissioners. So, this means a commissioner can make a motion for a suggested text edit, and then all commissioners have the ability to vote on that, to have it go through as a majority vote, to have that be included in, your recommendation for final edits. And the last possible option is you could deny Chapter 599 as fully exists. This means that you aren't able to recommend changes to the commission. So essentially, the city council, it still goes to city council, but then they would just see that the Heritage Preservation Commission recommended denial of that, and they can take that into account, whether, what they want to do based on that situation and based on staff's presentation in the public hearing at that time. So with that, I can take any more questions or comments from commissioners. I know Andrea and I are both open to addressing any specific concerns you may have or clarifying anything that maybe doesn't make sense at the moment. So, I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you for that report and update. I'm going to say if we can ask questions of staff right now before, and then we will have, I assume, a lively discussion. Commissioner Melblom.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. Mr. Skolecki, I have a question about so let's say we change let's say we as a group vote to change, just to have some clarity, section 599.70B. And we vote to change it from 5 years to 1 year for the period of validity for the demolition of a potential historic resource. If we do that, does the version that goes to City Hall say 1 year, or does the version that goes to City Hall say 5 years, and then there's like a note on the side? And here's why I'm asking this. I think if you all present exactly as we've approved, and then you have a memo next to it saying these are the changes, that is one way that people receive information. If you send them exactly as the staff have drafted it and then add our edits as a separate piece of information, then I think that prejudices them against it. I will be completely transparent. I highly doubt any of the city council people will read all through all of this, because they seem to be obsessed with things not inside the city, but outside of the city often. So my concern is, what is presented to them? Because I would like the version that we approve to be the version that is presented to the city council for approval. And then there could be a memo with it that says these are the changes specifically that the Heritage Preservation Commission asked for.
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Melblom. So it's my understanding that it will go to City Council with kind of a memo format. It's my understanding that that is how text amendments are generally presented to Council when they have gone to, for example, in front of Planning Commission for a change to zoning code, and that is how it's presented to council. I will say, so when it goes to Business Housing and Zoning Committee for a hearing, HPC's concerns or, any proposed changes or anything that's voted on is something that staff will highlight. At that point of this presentation, that's something that, if you vote to change something and it is something that you all vote to approve, that's something that kind of becomes a point of focus when staff is going to bring that to council.
And I understand that. I guess I'm just asking, which version is the document itself? Is it the version that we approve, or is it the version that staff gave us, and then our amendments are talked about in a memo separately? I think the staff should propose what we approve. Any changes should be in the body of the document that's being proposed, not as a separate piece of paper. Does that clarify where I'm going with this?
I think that Andrea Burke might also have comments. Maybe not.
Yeah, I agree with everything Rob said, and to answer, thank you, Chair Brunberg, to answer your question, Commissioner Belbum, staff sends the staff version to the Business Housing and Zoning Committee with your changes in a memo. The reason being is because the HPC is advisory to the City Council on a legislative decision, and a text amendment's a legislative decision. So the HPC doesn't have the power to tell staff to include their version, because as we are taking this, you have advisory powers as delegated to you in the ordinance in Title II and also in Title 23. So staff is presenting their text amendment. We get your advisory recommendation about if you approve with recommended changes, what those changes are, and we'll, represent and put it out as to what you all vote on to say, here were the changes that the HPC requested to be made to the document, or if you deny it. So to answer your question, yes, we give our version, and then we give a memo that explains your changes that you voted on at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other clarifying question. Are HPC commissioners allowed to testify at that hearing?
My answer to that question was no, because your duty as HP commissioners is up here giving your recommendation to the City Council as representing as the Heritage Preservation Commission for your opinions on the matter, and you will be sending your recommendation to the council, voted on as a body.
Thank you. Other questions for staff at this point? Commissioner Hare.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. Mr. Skalecki, I'm wondering why there is no option to deny with comments. It seems to me that approving with recommended changes is not agreeing, but we are approving something. And if there's a denial, I just don't understand why there is no comments that would get passed along in that situation.
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Hare. So I guess I'm trying to understand in a situation where you would want to vote to deny it and then add comments, would the comments just be on why you voted to deny it? Or, because I think, I guess I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it could be reasoning of, why we are recommending that this version of this text amendment does not become adopted by their legislative voting process, especially if we're not able to testify at the meeting. It feels like, yes, we're approving something that we don't agree with. And
I guess that's the point where staff is trying to understand, what is what parts of this is not agreed upon. And then that's where you're able to make recommendations to council. So, it is up to you if you would want to deny it, but at this point, with all the other proposed changes going through it, it seems like, at least based on what staff's heard, it seems like for the most part, there have been positive changes in the ordinance, but there are areas that commissioners want to see altered. And that's where, if you vote on these changes and then vote to approve it and send forward to council, that's where they can be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Oh, Andrea.
Forgive me, Chair Brownberg, that was kind of loud. I wanted to add one more point to Commissioner Hare's question. Okay, but I would say, just to kind of quickly go over, approve as everything. It's a blanket approval. And this kind of lines up with the boards and commissions way and, kind of Robert's rules of how we going to approve and deny. A deny is a blanket denial. You're saying absolutely not. I don't like anything in here. I don't want anything in here. That's final. I don't have any changes. It's an automatic thumbs down, and there is no opportunity for comments is kind of how the system works. But an approval with amendments is an option for, I approve the document as a whole to take up this new text amendment. However, here are my list of recommend changes. Now, they can be whatever you want. It can be specific edits. It can be large changes, such as, I'm just going to throw something out there that I've heard before. I want the HPC to have final action on design guidelines instead of the city council. That is a possible change. Or you can be, I want this word added here. Those are both options, but it's to say, yes, I'm still approving this amendment going through, but here are all of the things that I would want to see changed in this text, and then that's where we send that on and saying the HPC approved the amendment as a whole. Think of it kind of like conditions in a way. We're in different worlds here, from a legislative and a quasi-judicial, but kind of, if that helps, think of it kind of that way, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? Okay, then let's discuss. I feel like there's a lot of comments, so I'm trying to figure out sort of like the best way for us to sort through this. I don't know if we want to go by the pieces that were provided by Commissioners Melblom and Thomas and just go section by section and sort of like give our thoughts on that. Just so that when we get to a voting point, we feel like we have a understanding and it's not like we're voting and then making friendly amendments to an amendment to an amendment. Okay, sound okay? I'm looking for head nods. Commissioner Corrado.
Do we need to go through a motion first?
We will, so this is just the discussion portion of this. Once we get to a point where we're ready to make a motion, my understanding is that we will need to make a motion of the things that were so kindly put up on the screen. And then if we, I guess you either are voting to approve as is or voting to approve and then sort of like, we would do the voting and then you would do the second. And then at that point where I ask for discussion, people are able to offer up amendments. And then we can vote on the amendments and then would vote on the action again or voting to deny. Does that help clarify?
Yes.
Commissioner Hare.
I have one final clarifying question. Do we need to be fully wrapped by 6:30, or do we have longer?
My understanding is that we have until 7:30.
7:30. Okay, thank you.
Everyone is like, oh, goodness. Came prepared. Okay, I'm going to start by just saying let's talk about section 599.70. And it looks like one of the comments is changing that from 5 years to 1 year. Thoughts? Commissioner Corrado.
I guess 5 to 1 is, it's a very large difference. My only thought is, one, it's a different way to approach a project, I think. And so there will be an adjustment period for those affected and some type of transition period, I guess. I don't really know how that will get handled, but just kind of foreseeing that, I think it is different, but it's just a different way to approach a project. So that was initially I was like, wow, that's a lot of reduction. But you can just approach a project differently and ask for the permit at a different time. So, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Corrado. I had a very similar reaction of, I admittedly am not a developer, but I feel like sometimes when people are putting in for demolitions, it's to line up like, okay, is this project going to work, which can sometimes take a few years. So I understand sort of feeling like 5 years is a lot, but then I feel like 1 year gives me anxiety as a non-developer. Commissioner Melblom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bjornberg, and for your comment, Commissioner Corrado. I can't speak for Commissioner Thomas, but in my mind, if you want to demolish a potential historic resource, you should just get on with it. Like, if it's really that much of a problem, it should just do it. Why would you want to tee up something and then let it sit there in limbo for 5 years? Partially, I'm thinking that it would help prevent what we saw earlier today with a building that just is neglected for a long time. And if they're not serious about it, I'm not sure that, if they're not serious about demolishing the building, I'm not sure why we would give them 5 years to unchange their mind, so to speak.
Commissioner Thomas.
So I appreciate all your comments on this. I think that I was approaching it the same way as Commissioner Melblom. Like, hey, if you're going to demolish this. But thinking about it from a development standpoint, which I am not a developer, but I do work with them. And I think about it, some of these projects do take a couple of years to get off the ground. And I could see a situation where there is a potential developer who wants to develop a property, but they don't want to propose, what they propose is going to be dependent upon whether or not something can be demolished. And if it can't be demolished, then it would change their proposal, which those usually do take a couple of years. So I would be amenable to maybe updating that to maybe meet in the middle at 3 years.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Alexander.
What is the current period in the current text amendment or the current text ordinance?
The current, you mean currently?
Correct.
The right now times,
Yeah.
not the proposed.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. So to answer the question, there's currently nothing stated in text that states exactly how long that decision is. So that has led to kind of some, I wouldn't say disagreements, but maybe misunderstanding among, different city attorneys and staff in certain situations. So the guidance is that currently that decision of a demolition potential historical resource application, so if, for example, a demolition is approved through that, the current guidance is that's kind of indefinite, that decision. So from that standpoint, I think staff was looking at developing something, from forever down to what, and I think that's how we set on kind of 5 years at that point, so.
Andrea.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. And currently also the way the ordinance stated is approval periods are good, and this is a blanket for all applications, are good for 2 years with the option of a 1 year extension. As Rob had stated, there was some previous interpretations that said demolitions of historic resources, as they're called now, were in perpetuity approvals, hence why we developed this to make it more clear. But just to answer Commissioner Alexander's question, really the standard is 2 years with an option for a 1-year extension to equal 3.
Thank you. I keep thinking that you're, it's okay. Any other comments from commissioners on that one? Commissioner Melblom?
I would be willing to go along with 3 years if that would be the consensus of the commission.
I also will say, I sort of like that 2 years with an option to extend another year. I feel like it's nice just to be consistent, and it again, I think gets us a little bit closer to the, if you're going to demolish it, just demolish it, but then also is like, you know, if you need a little bit more time.
Chair Burenberg, I had the same thought for the same reasons.
So feels like some agreement on that. I'm gonna move to 599.2205. C. Okay, this is, like I see Commissioner Melblom really ready. Oh, Commissioner Corrado.
Oh, just noting we have a 210.5 on Commissioner Thomas's.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to that one, 210.5.
Sorry, I just, really quick. I believe that the 220.5C and the 210.5C are actually the same thing. I think that Commissioner Melblom may have, because there is no 225C. There's only a 210.5C.
Thank
so
you.
I just wanted to clarify that I think they are the same.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you for that clarification.
I was confused by it yesterday as well.
Okay, so this is the suggestion for adding the words by city council action, and then also possibly by adding the words by city council action, which may only overturn by simple majority upon written findings that the decision of the commission was unsound. Commissioner Melblom.
I support Commissioner Thomas's version. I think this is good language, making the city council state clearly why they disagree with something that we have recommended to them.
Other commissioners? Staff?
I wanted to thank you, Chair Bjornberg, and forgive me for jumping in. I want to just make something very clear here. The ability to change what the city council can or can't do is very, 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 very slim. They are the elected body of the city. They're the legislative body of the city. And as an advisory body that also has decision-making authority, does not have the ability to tell the city council how they make their decisions. At the end of the day, you are still able to make and vote on a choice for that amendment, but I wanted to just say in the hierarchy of how things are set up under Title II, with the HBC being a Tier 2 body, it does not have the ability to change what the city council and how they make their findings. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say one more piece of information as a correction to something I had just said earlier on the record, that we're going to get a little bit further advice on whether the HPC can testify at the BIZ meeting, but should it be something that can happen, you would be testifying in your personal capacity, not on behalf of the HPC, and you would advise to still acknowledge your role on the HPC, but that you are not representing the body in your comments. But I will be sure to get just a double and triple check on that, and let everybody know. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Melblom.
Yeah, Andrea, so then Ms. Ms. Burke, excuse me. So I have a question. If that's the case, then anything that deals in Chapter 599 with the city council is completely optional, I would assume. What you just told me was we can't put any conditions in here that would bind the city council. So therefore, anything that in 599 that binds the city council to certain actions are nebulous. Is that correct?
Commissioner Melblum, kind of, which is not the best answer, because I think I know, I could be wrong, but I think the section that we added that is, giving the city council 180 days to act on a designation is a new charted territory that we went into, something that I know some in legal offices are opposed to, others believe it's supported, and ultimately it'll be their decision to take that language or not. And so again, I can't say that you can't make that recommendation, because you do have that ability to make that recommendation. But, in reading through some of the written comments, I noticed a lot of comments that are, wanting to change what the city council's powers and authorities are, and the HPC's ability to have the city council do. And that, unfortunately, is not something that is given to this body.
And I understand that, but okay, if they approve the text of 599, doesn't that bind them to that? So if we wrote in here, like, let's say 599.2105C, if we wrote in there, if our addition said by city council action, which may only overturned by simple majority upon written findings that the decision of the commission was unsound, if we added to that, and they all have to be wearing green clothes when they make that vote for it to be valid, if they agree to that, that becomes the regulation, correct? Whether they honor it or not is, well, hopefully they would, because it would be legally binding to them, is my assumption, because they've legally approved it. I mean, I understand what you're saying. They have to agree to, you could think of it this way, they have to agree to diminish their power slightly, or their authority, by agreeing to some of the changes that we're proposing. And I fully expect that some of them they may not, but I also don't want to throttle back what I believe as an individual representing our constituents in the city. And what I would hope that the commission would agree is that these are reasonable diminishments of the city council, because we know that they have done things in the past that have not necessarily been in the best interest of preservation. So that's kind of where I keep coming at all of these things from, because it's not their area of expertise and higher education. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I think to answer your question, should they decide to include that text, yes, that would be. However, what I foresee happening is that legal staff would come in and say, this is not something that is allowed legally in this text. And I'm assuming here, I am not an attorney, and I want to make that very clear. I know we consulted extensively on this document when we made some of the decisions we did, but yes, if they ultimately approve it, that is how it becomes. Thank you.
Commissioner Corrado.
So I guess further clarification, if we as an advisory commission, in our advisory role, recommend that these changes be made, say that, I don't know, reading this Minnesota State Statute 471-193, that our changes perhaps are more in line with what that state statute intends, and they have the option to accept or deny at their meeting.
Commissioner Corrado, yes.
Oh, sorry. Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I was debating whether to pipe in. I also am not an attorney, and there's not an attorney here, but I do know the legislative process very well. And my my hunch here, without being an expert on this portion of the code, the city ordinance is basically the city's version of a law, right? However, city ordinances are subservient to the city charter, which we talk in our office as the city's constitution. And so I think where we're potentially entering some legally murky waters is if this is in conflict with the city charter or powers that are already explained in other portions of the code, this would be in violation of that. You can't have the code conflicting in two different places, and the council can't approve a code that is in conflict with the city charter. So without being an expert on this portion of the code, I have the feeling that's kind of where some of the consternation is coming from. And then just for clarity, this is actually section 599-210C. You do not need to reference the 5 because the C is not part of 5. 5 is part of B above it. So just clarifying that in case anybody's like deep in the code trying to figure out where we are.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm like, okay, where were we? I'm like, I guess. Commissioner Thomas and then Alexander.
I just want to say, hearing all this, I would still support having the city council provide written findings, at least requesting it of them. They may deny that portion of it, but I would still be in support of at least requesting it.
Commissioner Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just going to, kind of, I guess, clarify in plain language what we're asking of city council, right? We're simply saying, if you're going to reverse a decision by the HPC, we're asking you to provide reason for doing so, correct? That doesn't seem like an unreasonable request. And yeah, I mean, I guess, to Commissioner Melbourne's point, I don't know that we're even really asking them to diminish their power, but rather to delegate their power, and they're delegating it to an organization that has sort of the expertise, the training, the history, the passion, to make these decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Corrado.
I guess my observation, when they take action though, aren't there minutes, and isn't that kind of a finding? I guess that was my only confusion, because if that's...
I see heads nodding over Andrea Burke.
Chair Bjornberg and Commissioner Corrado and Commissioner Alexander, I appreciate the plain language because that also brought me into reality. The city council, when they go to reverse or an appeal, not reverse, but an item that you decide on gets appealed and it goes to the city council. They can't just say, I go this way. They also have to make findings, and they have to, just like you do, to make findings to choose in favor of the appellant or in the opposite direction of the HPC. That's standard procedure. And I think still, well, I've already stated my concern, but I will leave it at that. But just so everyone knows, at the biz committee, should they go in another direction, they also must make findings. It's standard procedure. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Comments from commissioners on this item. Commissioner Thomas.
Sorry, just one more. I'm happy to hear that it is standard. I mean, I assume it was. Sometimes you just want to put things in language anyway. But I think the main point is that we're only allowing appeals by the city council. I think when we're saying by city council action and adding that to this this version here, because I think before the current version that's being proposed is it just says subject to applicable appeals of the commission's decisions, but it doesn't say who can appeal those. So I think we're really just adding in city council specifically. So just to clarify Commissioner Melblom's original edit.
Commissioner Hare.
I just want to note that I do also agree with Commissioner Thomas that the clarification is helpful.
Comments on that? Are we sort of leaning towards feeling like adding by city council action as the clarification, or Commissioner Melblom?
I would like us to keep Commissioner Thomas's version rather than my version. I think hers just adds a little bit more meat to this, so it is very clear.
Thank you. I see heads nodding. Okay.
Well, sorry.
Commissioner Wallace.
I think the version with the proposed text of just by city council action feels like the balance between what they're already required to do. Because they're required to present findings, it feels kind of a moot point to add the additional language, whereas the city council action, I think, is the core piece. We wanted that clarification, but that's my opinion.
Commissioner Corrado.
I concur with that opinion. Thank you.
Commissioner Alexander.
Yeah, I do as well. I think it might make it more palatable to get agreed to than rather if we're, I don't know, sort of redundantly adding information that they already do.
Commissioner Thomas.
I will concur with that as well.
Okay, I see nodding. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, someone's tracking this, right? We'll make it all a motion at the end, don't worry. Okay, so then moving on to 599.230. Okay. Are these noting the same things? Okay. I'm going to look at Commissioner Thomas. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I'll talk about mine. So the current one really just says the city council shall have the following powers and duties in connection with the administration of this chapter, and then it kind of lists all of the various duties. I did add that on top of those duties that are below, I'm saying they must accept or reject recommendations by the Heritage Preservation Commission within 90 days of such action, and that I'm saying they can only amend the changes, noted from what they can do below, and that council may overturn actions. Again, we can remove this part upon written findings, because we've decided, I think, that is standard practice. And then I just finished it by the city council will have further powers, and that goes with the below. I think it aligns primarily with Melblom's recommendations as well, where he is also requesting that they kind of have a timeline of when they can do the actions that they're proposed to be able to do below. And I'm not going to speak for him, but I'm going to assume that's what he was thinking.
Commissioner Melblom.
Yes, that was what I was meaning, and to just be very clear, I'm trying to prevent what has happened with the designation of the Glendale Townhome Community, which, when it was nominated by Councilmember Gordon, kind of went what seems like into purgatory, and then Councilmember Walmsley, now that she is representing the district, brought it back again and went through the process, and now it seems like it's back in purgatory. And I just believe that we need to force the council to make a decision and not allow them to allow things to just live in limbo. So that's the whole intention with putting a timeline to say they need to make a decision, and if they don't make a decision, then what we have decided is what is what is now law, I guess, or has passed ordinance.
Commissioner Corrado? I was like, were you?
Yeah, I guess this goes back to the earlier comment about the city charter. I'm just confused as to how city council cannot take any action on an item that's on their agenda. So I don't know if this is a problem, one, or an issue that gets solved here within this particular section, which we're probably likely supporting, and or perhaps there is another place it also should be amended.
Clerk.
Chair Bjornberg and Commissioners, yeah, I can try to take this one. This, I think Mr. Skolecki kind of alluded to this earlier in his comments, but the issue with this is not simply a matter of amending anything. This, I mean, to be frank, this is, there's no way to make this happen. The reality is nothing is approved by council except for an affirmative vote by council. This body cannot make them have approved something by not doing something, right? So there's just not a path for, there's not a path to have something be approved by failing to approve. I don't know if I'm stating this clearly, but without council taking affirmative action on something, it won't happen.
Commissioner Thomas.
I want to put out, I think we're conflating two different portions of this. So the one where we're saying, where if they don't make a decision, then the HPC decision should be law. That's in 740. So that one's further below. This first one is really just asking them to approve or disapprove within 90 days instead of not doing anything.
Yes, and no, I am looking at that, but the reality is without, this would be an ordinance, right? So city council would, be bound by this, but at the same point, if they still fail within that 90 days, they still haven't affirmatively approved anything. So nothing has still happened. There are, like, I'm trying to think of, like, in the Planning Commission, for example, there are applications that are acted on where the Planning Commission makes a final decision unless there's an appeal, right? And I think that same thing happens here. That is different than actually adopting a historic designation or adopting an ordinance. Those have to be acted on by the council and approved or vetoed by the mayor. There's no way to kind of make it happen by default.
Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Wallace.
Just a follow-up question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. This is just broadly. Are there any instances in the code that have a time frame for city council to act? Or, are there any instances of that?
There are, but in those cases, there is usually some remedy associated with it. Whereas if this does not happen within this period, here's what will happen. But again, those are situations where we're acting on an application, or maybe there's some sort of usually if it doesn't happen within that time period, the end result is that nothing happens. That's generally, but it kind of depends on the specific subject before them.
Commissioner Melblom.
And Clerk, I appreciate that comment. So therefore, this may seem futile, but I think it sends a sense of the commission that even if the city council says, we're not going to agree to that because we're not going to bind ourselves to something that you people say we should do, I still think us including it sends a signal that we find it unacceptable that the city council doesn't take action on things, that things just drift out there. And we have a very clear example of that now coming back and having the second time. We don't get other opportunities to comment on this, so if we decide not to do this, even if it's rejected, I think it sends a signal this is something that we find troubling as a commission.
Commissioner Hare.
Can that concern be included in our memo, but we could leave the text, not suggest any text changes?
Commissioner Melbaum.
I don't know if there's any mechanism for us to be able to force staff to comment on something that isn't actually something that we approve, because that would be therefore asking staff to pass along information that isn't going to change anything. If this is a futile activity, that is a completely futile activity. So that would be my concern, is I think it's just, that's even less, that's like a little whimper, not even a speaking at room voice.
Andrea Burke.
I have a new little gavel here, forgive me. Thank you, Chair Jubarman. I just wanted to do a quick time check. At 6:29, we have 1 hour left. We need to make a decision on this evening. And so I encourage you to prioritize your changes. And, let's talk through, and I've heard the issue come up, at the end of the day, we've stated some of the items that are, yes, it's futile to ask the city council to do something. It's futile. And, what I've stated, what Rob stated, and what the clerks have stated, at the end of the day, if that's the recommended change you want to make, we can't stop you. But I think I wanted to just state, I encourage you to, think about which changes that are very important to you, that you think will be helpful in communicating to the council, and bringing those forth so we can make the best use of the time that we have left. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Corrado.
Yeah, I guess my opinion on this is, I understand sending the city council a message on dereliction of their duty, but I don't know if this is the means that I would choose to do so. I don't know if, op-ed pieces are the way I would go, but it's really disappointing what they continue to do, but this is not the hill I would die on, I guess, personally.
Yeah, I will add my 2 cents. I feel similarly, and I feel like it's also, especially if we sort of know that legally it wouldn't sort of like pan out, I feel like it, to me, I don't want to necessarily be including recommendations that can't get acted upon, because I don't want them to have to go through and sort of like pick and choose, or get a legal opinion that's like, oh, no, this isn't going to get enacted. So then it's like, oh, what are they doing?
I feel similarly. I would vote in quotes that we move to a different topic and prioritize.
Thank you. I will also just note that we can still, as we go through this, after there's a potential motion, if we still want to be talking about these to take a vote on them, we can. Okay, so the next one I believe is at 599.23, number 3, and that is about landmark designation, and that is, well, there's 2 different possibilities here. One is to remove the phrasing to amend designations, and then one is to add the phrasing Heritage Preservation Commission designations shall stand unless overturned by city council action. Thoughts or comments on this? Commissioner Corrado.
I guess this is more of a thought than a comment. I think the thing that I struggle with is, I understand the city council's powers to amend a designation, as in voting for a recommended amendment to a designation. I think what I struggle with is the actions that recently have been taken where they amend the specifics within the text of the amendments. And I don't know if there's a way to clarify that.
That's a good question. Commissioner Thomas.
This does not answer his question. But hearing, I just want to, because I proposed some of these things that we're looking at. And I proposed this before I read the staff report, so I'm going to admit that. So I think that based on what is happening in the code and that the city council is the only one who can make these legislative changes, I think my edits, honestly, for this item and 740C are basically ones that I don't think we can really do anything about because the city council has to make those decisions regardless of what we would like to have happen. So what I guess I'm saying is this edit, I don't know if that's even legally allowable. So,
Thank you for that, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Melblom.
But I do think based on the conversation earlier, the observation, that if the city council approves this, they are binding themselves to these things. And I think my proposal to strike, to amend designations, I think if they agree to that, then I think that would be fine. I don't think we're asking them to do anything. I think what Commissioner Thomas is saying is going back to what Andrea had said previously for her version. So I would like to still keep my version as a potential proposal here.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. I think that was my understanding too. I don't know that we have answered Commissioner Corrado's question. Commissioner Corrado.
Well, I guess my concern here is then do we ever amend a designation ever in the city? And if so, who, because the city council has to be the body that actually signs off, right? So is there a way to, I guess, somehow make it clear and help city council understand their role?
Yeah.
I guess would be my sort of question. I don't know if it's every time we send something upstairs, the memo starts with you are approving or denying.
I am almost going to ask staff of this question because I do feel like this is something that came up in discussion during our retreats, right? Because I think that one of the things that we had talked about was sort of what happened with the Dinkytown, where there was a designation that was recommended, and then it went to city council, and then they changed the period of significance. And so I think that this is how do we not have that happen? And I feel like at that point, we had sort of asked, like, okay, is there a way that we can have the ordinance read in a way that city council is able to either approve as recommended or deny. And so I'm going to look to staff to see if they can help us out.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. And that is something that we discussed internally because we were curious as well on, decisions such as, I'll use the example for design guidelines because I know when we were discussing this came up. Is there ability for city council to either approve or deny something without making changes to it? And ultimately, the guidance we received is no. They have the ability to make whichever changes they see fit and appropriate for what they're deciding on. I think with designation amendments too, we really worked through this in different scenarios. There are different ways that we look at amending designation. So I think the one that is focused on, based on your discussion that I'm hearing, is council has the ability to, we use the example of the Warehouse Historic District. It was once a smaller historic district, but has been expanded to its current boundaries. So that's kind of the designation amendment that we're talking about here, where adding more properties to a designation where that designation is taking into account different boundaries in the situation, where it's taking into account different properties and different histories, that essentially is another designation, right? You know, it's amending a designation, but in order to designate that as an amended district, it would need the same type of resolution that amends that to be able to have that, you know, and that's a council process that as we've discussed, so.
Commissioner Alexander.
I mean, even in that example, wouldn't we be the ones recommending the expansion of that boundary, like based on an analysis of those buildings, research into those histories? I mean, I guess what expertise, what reason, what rationale does council have to redefine those boundaries?
I feel like, sorry, I'm going to jump in. I feel like this is, again, getting back to that like piece of council is like the final decision maker. So I think, would still be giving recommendations. It's just that it's up to them to accept or deny or amend them. How'd I do, guys?
Okay, so then.
Andrea Burke.
Sorry. Well, then, just Paul's point is to take out the amend part, and you approve or deny.
Approve or deny what we have suggested.
Right, which seems reasonable.
Andrea Burke.
I want to state something, I'm going to take it straight from the memo because I knew, we knew this was a topic. Amending designations have never been in the ordinance before. This came out of some of the situations that we have seen in Dinkytown with folks wanting the ability, with the HPC wanting the ability to be able to amend designations in different areas, whether it is expanding boundaries, whether it is the period of significance, whether it's the criteria of significance, whether it's the contributing, non-contributing, and that is all laid out, different ways to amend designations in 599.750. So you can amend the period of significance or criteria, you can amend the contributing, non-contributing status, you can amend the boundaries, or you can remove a landmark from designation. These are things that have never been in here before. However, designation changes the legal status of a property, and it subjects it to the heritage preservation guidelines. That's the key here, what designation does. And since designations are quasi-judicial, however, the resolution to designate a property is legislative in nature. And so therefore amending them is also legislative in nature because the resolution is the document that designates a property. And that is a power that is only given to the city council. Staff in the 599.750 kind of delegated a few things. So we gave some of the big things that really tie to that legislative resolution to the city council, as it should. However, items like contributing, non-contributing status, staff retained as the ability to make those changes as new information became available. So if you take away amending it, you would have to give it to somebody because that's still in the ordinance. And I would just say, in staff's opinion, that's a very important thing to have in the ordinance because it's something we've seen come up over and over and over again. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments or thoughts on this? Commissioner Corrado.
Yeah, given this information, I mean, I think it makes sense to keep amend designation, and it's, I guess, up to city council to understand that we are trying to protect them as much as, protect our resources in making our recommendations and decisions that we send upstairs for approval. Thanks.
Commissioner Thomas.
I concur.
I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, all right. We're gonna move on to the next item, which I believe is 599.300 C2. And this is a time, extensions of time, grant a time extension of up to 180 days rather than any time limit. Like, I saw some heads nod, not a lot of comments. Commissioner Hare.
I have clarification on the proposed text amendment. It says time extension if up to 180 days. So would that mean that they could say 5 days, they could say 10 days, they could say 100, but not exceeding 180 days?
I feel like I saw Commissioner Melblom.
Yes, Commissioner Hare, that was my intention, and there is a typo. It should say time extension of up to 180 days, not ifs. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that item? Commissioner Hare.
I would be in support of that limitation.
I see heads nodding. Okay, gonna move us along. 599.620. And this is about, I believe, changing, okay, both do say removing the sentence of nominations submitted by a member of the city council or the mayor shall be exempt from this requirement. And then possibly adding nominations submitted by a member of the HPC, city council, or mayor shall be exempt. So it seems like it is, do we remove exemptions or do we add HPC as a member of the exempt group? Thoughts? Commissioner Melblom.
Yeah, my understanding is if we add HPC, then we're returning to the status that we currently have.
I think generally that's correct, but I think that members of the public are the one thing, right? I don't know that anybody right now has to submit information that in depth. So I think that this is, they would still be the only group that would have to
Correct.
do the due diligence
Correct.
ahead of time. Commissioner Corrado.
Yeah, I support the addition of the members of the HPC. I understand council and mayor, they have their chartered rights, but as experts in our field and being asked to sit on this body, appointed by council, I think it makes sense to add us as also exempt.
I concur with that.
Other thoughts on this item? Commissioner Alexander.
I'm just in agreement too, and I think it's probably easier to get passed than the alternative.
Okay. I feel like I see some consensus. 599.740C, I do know that Commissioner Thomas said sort of like rescind that, but I know that it was also on Commissioner Melblom's list. So this would be, again, that in the absence of a decision within 180 days, the decision of the Heritage Preservation Commission shall become law. Commissioner Melblom.
I'm willing to withdraw it. I don't think my fellow council members want to make a statement on this as much as I would like to make a statement on this. So I will withdraw my proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. The last item that we have written, 599.830. This is adding, council may overturn Heritage Preservation Commission recommendations only by simple majority upon written findings that the decision was unsound. Commissioner Thomas.
I think we just strike that recommendation as well, just based on the others.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Okay, so we have worked through the attachments. Do folks have any other comments or pieces that they want to bring up? Commissioner Hare.
I just wanted to clarify 599.620. Was it our recommendation that we leave the text nomination submitted by a member of the city council or the mayor shall be exempt from this requirement, that stays in the text, and then we just are proposing to add the nomination submitted by a member of the HPC. I see. I'm sorry. I answered my own question. Thank you.
That's okay. Clarifications are never bad. And I'm happy to also, we can sort of like run through what we talked about. So no one has to. Commissioner Wallace.
I just want to make a comment on the record that I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this and the development of these, both from the staff and from this commission, in the depth of which you've read through. I mean, I've read these, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I had to kind of catch up, but I just really appreciate the work. I think it's very meaningful, what we're trying to do for the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. I'm sorry, Commissioner Wallace, I was looking at you. Done so good. Okay, so like I said, I think I'm going to just really quick run through what it sounds like we had arrived on possible consensus with, and then if after that we want to make a motion to re-clarify all of the things, that is a potential path forward. Sound good? Okay, I'm looking. Okay, so we discussed 599.70B, changing the period of time from 5 years to 2 years with the option to extend for 1 additional year. 599.2205, adding subject to applicable appeals of the commissioner's decisions by city council action.
Sorry, Chair, one note on that. I think it's the 599.210C, just so we're.
Thank you. I didn't read C because I thought it was just 5. I crossed that out on the other one. Okay, I might need help with 599.23. We skipped 230.
We crossed that out. Or I crossed that out.
We also, did we also skip 599.2303, the to amend designations? Okay, yes, sorry. My note-taking was not as extensive
Correct.
as I hoped.
I wrote that was crossed out.
Okay, then 599.260, adding or editing the sentence to read, nominations submitted by a member of HPC, city council, or the mayor shall be exempt from this requirement.
Correct.
599.300C2, editing to say grant a time extension of up to 180 days.
Correct.
Okay. So I think that's 4 total.
And then
Commissioner Alexander.
Hi. Okay, I don't want to crack a whole thing right open again, but I know there was concern, and I know Rob spoke to this earlier, clarifying, but internally I know there was concerns about the sort of definitions or the powers granted the planning director. I guess I mean, are we resolved? Are we on board where the sort of definition that Rob provided earlier is satisfactory for all of us? Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner Alexander. I think that that's a good question. I feel like this is something that has sort of continued to come up and was addressed in the memo. Do other commissioners have comments or thoughts on that topic? Commissioner Corrado.
Yeah, I think in general, I believe the staff comments kind of addresses the concern. I guess it would always be nice to have a planning commissioner who is very forward-thinking in their preservation and understands the topic well and continues to delegate where it's appropriate and best delegated. But there, I guess, always is a fear. Governments are kind of fickle, but that's why we have good staff. And hopefully we continue to move forward in an appropriate manner.
Commissioner Maston.
I guess I just have a question for staff. I think we trust you fully, but is there anything codified that establishes that the historic team is always our definition of planning director when we're reading these?
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Maston, it is not in the code right now, and it wasn't in the code in the 2001 version or the code previous to that. It was something I, confess, and we had brought up that we did look into, and we're told that that was not something we could add to the code because it doesn't so much, it defines kind of the expertise that's needed, and the code is defining just kind of the role and who does it, and then it's the planning staff that go to hire the expertise, and that's kind of where that comes from. So again, to answer, we did look into it. There is nothing in there, to answer your question quite bluntly, and there wasn't before the previous version, and it is not something that is put into the code normally.
Okay, thank you.
Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I have a little bit of context to add to that too, just since in the clerk's office we work on ordinances across the city and in various departments, and one of the additional reasons why we generally don't recommend getting too specific in the code is that the code of ordinances is very difficult to change, and it's that way intentionally, right? Because as a resident, a business owner, property renter owner in the city, you don't want the city's laws changing every 5 minutes because then you don't know how to deal with it, right? And as city departments also change over the years, divisions within departments change. All of a sudden, you can get in situations where the code says very specifically what division does this work, and then all of a sudden the department wants to change the structure a little bit of the department, and all of a sudden it's very hard to do because now we also have to change the ordinance in order to accomplish that. So generally keeping the code a little bit more department general is much easier to manage.
Commissioner Thomas.
This is a different topic. I just want to say that I know that I came in with a lot of edits, and I'm with Commissioner Melblom on wanting to send a message. I'm normally that aggressive person, but I've also come to recognize the need to kind of play nice with people and not have them hate us and want them to work with us, doing the politics. And so while I support Commissioner Melblom's sentiments 100%, I just didn't want you to feel like you were out on a limb on your own. I'm with you. I just... Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Corrado.
We can always run against them for council seats.
I will add, I appreciate the clarification from the clerk on the planning director role. I feel like this is a little bit of a challenging piece because I completely understand the challenges of applying this in a work environment that is always changing and can always be changing. I think that it just has been a concern of mine, and I said this last time, just, with where government at a large scale is with appointing people who have zero qualifications to do things. Like, that's where my concern comes from. And we've been really fortunate that we have really great staff who understand preservation and are really great advocates for it. And we have a great commission of people who are qualified and are passionate about it. And so the system is working the way that it should. And I think that for me, it's just I don't want it to be at risk of breaking down, but I understand the challenges of putting that into a ordinance. Commissioner Alexander.
So just to clarify, it is a hired position. I think this is what was kind of being established. It's not an appointment, right? So like some of the examples we see out in the CDC or other such positions where unqualified folks are.
Thank you. I am going to look to staff to clarify this.
Chair Bjornberg and Commissioner Alexander, the CPED director is an appointed position. It does delegate down, and they can designate or delegate who they want to, and they delegate to the historic preservation team staff and planning staff to carry out this ordinance. Thank you.
Other thoughts or comments from the commission? Commissioner Melblom.
If there are no other ones, I believe that we have to make a motion to approve Ordinance 599, and I am prepared to do that. I would make a motion that the Heritage Preservation Commission recommends that City Council approve the text amendment to adopt the amended regulations governing heritage preservation, and then I would separately will follow up with specifically reading out all of the amendments.
Is there a second for that motion?
Wallace seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Discussion.
So now I want to, okay.
Yes.
So
I believe now is when you would like to make an amendment.
I would like to make several amendments, and I'll read through them so that, because I know that you all would like that. So the first amendment would be to change section 599.70B to read, no approval of a demolition of a potential historic resource granted by the Heritage Preservation Commission or City Council shall be valid for a period longer than 2 years with an option to be extended by up to 1 year from the date of such approval unless the required wrecking permit is obtained within such period and the action approved is substantially begun and proceeds on a continuous basis toward completion. I'd like to recommend the amendment of section 599.210C to read, the Heritage Preservation Commission shall make final decisions on the following matters in the administration of this chapter, subject to applicable appeals of the Commission's decision by City Council action. I'd like to recommend that we approve the amendment to section 599.300C2, and that text will read, extensions of time upon written request by the applicant, the planning director may, for good cause shown and without any notice or hearing, grant a time extension of up to 180 days to any time limit imposed on an applicant by these application procedures. I'd also like to, and the final one will be for section 599.620, that the text shall read, only properties previously determined to be potential historic resources may be nominated. Exemptions for, the edit will be that we would add at the end of that section, nominations submitted by a member of the HPC, City Council, or the mayor shall be exempt from this requirement.
I'm getting head nods. Any other discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
On the amendments to the Amendment 599, Commissioner Alexander.
Aye.
Booty is absent. Hare.
Aye.
Corrado.
Aye.
Melblom.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Vice Chair Maston.
Aye.
Chair Bjornberg.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. And I'm looking to make sure that means we're good on that. No more. Okay. Okay, that concludes our discussion items. Do staff have any announcements?
Commissioners, no, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Do commissioners have any announcements? Commissioner Thomas.
If you are all in the Duluth area this weekend, we have Rethos is hosting a first ever Doors Open Duluth. It is a free event. We have some venues open, and we would love to see you come explore the history of Duluth if you have availability on, I believe it's Saturday, the 4th.
Thank you for that. I will also add, conversations have begun for planning for the, I don't know what year it is, 2026, I think, Minneapolis Preservation Awards. Usually we have a commissioner serve on that committee, on that planning committee with staff. I'm going to assume that Rob is doing it again. And I have done that for the last few years, but also want to offer it up if anybody else wants to sort of join in or take over that role. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to chat about it. They'll probably be planned for in the spring, but we've just started talking about it. Okay, any other commissioner announcements? With that, we've completed all items on the agenda. There being no other business to come before this meeting and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the HPC is October 14th, 2025. Thank you.